Alex zipped his suitcase and paused, staring at the small apartment he had called home for 5 years. Something about leaving this city tonight felt heavier than usual. It wasn't just the usual travel nerves or the burden of work. It was something he couldn't put his finger on, a quiet tension that made the walls of his apartment feel smaller, and his thoughts louder. He ran his fingers along the edge of the coffee table, noticing dust he hadn't bothered to clean, a stack of unread letters from Emily on the counter, and a single photograph of them smiling together last summer. The memory felt warm but fragile, like it could shatter if handled too roughly. Alex shook his head and tried to focus on the flight, telling himself it was just a 3-day business trip, routine meetings, presentations, small talk, and then home. But the feeling didn't leave. It lingered in his chest like a bird ready to fly but unsure which way to go. He exhaled slowly and forced a smile, deciding to ignore it for now, though he couldn't shake the sense that something unexpected was waiting. By the time he reached O'Hare Airport, the sky had darkened to a deep indigo, the city lights stretching behind him, flickering like tiny promises. Alex walked briskly through the terminal, his bag heavy on his shoulder, his mind juggling flight details, hotel reservations, and client presentations. Yet every few steps, he felt the pull again, subtle but insistent, a whisper of something unplanned waiting for him in Vancouver. He bought a coffee, sipped it without tasting much, and watched people move around him, travelers like him, some excited, some tired, some rushing toward unknown futures. He wondered if anyone else felt the same quiet unease he did when leaving home, if anyone else's heart pulled them somewhere before their body even followed. But he dismissed it again, telling himself he was imagining things, that business trips were always uneventful, predictable, controlled. The flight itself felt ordinary at first, the hum of engines, the dimmed lights, the occasional clatter of a beverage cart, yet Alex couldn't help staring out the window, clouds rolling beneath like soft waves, and for a moment, he allowed his thoughts to drift away from numbers and deadlines, imagining a city he had never walked before, streets alive with strangers and possibilities, rain softly falling, neon reflections on wet pavement, people laughing or arguing or sharing a quiet moment in cafes. He felt an odd mixture of excitement and apprehension, as if his life had been a book he had been reading for years, and now someone had opened the cover to a chapter he hadn't expected, and he had no idea how it would end. The thought made him tighten his grip on the armrest, a small smile creeping onto his face despite the nagging tension in his chest. Landing in Vancouver, the city greeted him with a soft drizzle, the streets gleaming under streetlights, the air crisp and cool. He felt an unfamiliar thrill as he exited the airport, the difference in the scenery striking, mountains looming in the distance, the smell of the ocean mingling with the city, and he realized just how different this trip was already. Every business trip felt like work, routine, obligations. But this one had a strange energy he could not explain, a sense that the ordinary would somehow become extraordinary. He grabbed a cab, the driver chatting politely about the weather, and Alex's mind wandered to Emily, wondering if she would notice the small changes in him after these 3 days, if she would even care. He felt a pang of guilt and longing at the thought, realizing he had been taking their relationship for granted, thinking that because it had lasted so long, it could survive silence and distance. Yet here, thousands of miles from home, he felt the truth pressing in. He had been avoiding something important. At the hotel, Alex checked in quickly, dropped his bag, and tried to review his presentation notes, but his thoughts kept drifting back to that strange pull, a feeling that there was someone here he was meant to meet, though he had no idea who. He told himself to focus, to prepare for meetings, to be professional, yet the hotel lobby seemed unusually quiet, almost expectant, the soft lighting casting gentle shadows, and he caught himself glancing around as if expecting someone to appear from nowhere, to speak a word that would change everything. He shook his head, chiding himself for such childish thoughts, yet he could not ignore the flutter in his chest that felt like the prelude to something he had never experienced before. Later that evening, he walked around the nearby streets, trying to clear his mind, the drizzle turning to a light mist, neon signs reflecting on the wet pavement, the sound of distant music and soft laughter from cafes mixing with the rain, and he realized he had been holding his breath for weeks, in work, in life, in his relationship, just moving forward without noticing the emptiness growing quietly beneath. And the thought made him ache in a way he could not explain. He felt both lonely and alive, as if the city itself was teaching him something he had forgotten, that life was unpredictable, and sometimes, the moments that mattered most came when you least expected them, and Alex felt an unfamiliar anticipation, a mixture of fear and excitement that made his pulse quicken, though he didn't know why, and he didn't know what would come next, yet he knew, somehow, that his life was about to shift in ways he could not yet see. As he returned to his room, the rain tapping softly against the window, Alex unpacked methodically but with distracted hands, thinking of Emily, of the life he had left behind for a few days, of the possibilities that Vancouver might hold, and he realized, as he sat on the edge of the bed, that sometimes journeys were not about the miles traveled, but the moments that changed the way you saw everything, and though he didn't know what those moments would be yet, he could feel them approaching. Quietly, insistently, like a tide that would not be stopped, and Alex lay down, staring at the ceiling, knowing that tomorrow would bring something unexpected, something that would stay with him long after he returned home, and for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it, whatever it might be. The next morning, Alex woke to the soft hum of the hotel air conditioner and the distant sounds of the city, rain still falling lightly outside, a steady rhythm that seemed to match his heartbeat. He got dressed, straightened his tie, and tried to shake the lingering feeling from the previous night, but it followed him like a shadow, subtle yet impossible to ignore. He told himself it was just nerves, but deep down, he knew something was different, something about this trip felt alive, waiting for him to notice. The hotel lobby was quiet, early light filtering through large windows, the smell of coffee drifting from the small cafe in the corner, and Alex scanned the room for familiar faces, knowing most people would be arriving for meetings, but he paused when he saw her, standing near the window, her posture calm but alert, a notebook held gently against her chest, hair catching the soft morning light, eyes thoughtful, scanning something in the distance, and Alex's breath caught for a moment, though he didn't know why. She looked familiar, yet not from anywhere he could place, and when their eyes met briefly, he felt an unexpected pull, a subtle recognition of something unspoken. Introductions were simple, polite, a handshake, a few exchanged words, but in that small moment, Alex noticed her warmth, the ease in her voice, the confidence that was quiet, not loud, a presence that felt real in a way most people didn't. Her name was Sarah, she worked with the partner company, and she smiled as if she already knew he was watching, though Alex immediately chastised himself for imagining things. Yet he could not stop noticing the small details, the way she adjusted the strap of her bag, the soft curve of her lips as she spoke, the thoughtful pause before she answered a question, each movement almost imperceptible but somehow magnetic. The meeting itself passed in a blur, presentations and figures flowing around them. Alex found his attention drifting, not on charts or forecasts, but on Sarah, noticing the quiet care she took in every word, the way she listened, nodded, asked questions with curiosity, her presence filling the space around him in a way that had nothing to do with work. He felt a strange mix of excitement and guilt, thinking of Emily and the distance that had grown between them, yet Sarah's energy was disarming, making him feel awake in a way he hadn't in years. During the break, they found themselves near the hotel cafe again, both reaching for the same small table, an unspoken agreement letting them share it, rain tapping lightly against the glass, steam rising from their drinks, the hum of conversation surrounding them, and for the first time in a long while, Alex felt a conversation flow without effort, without calculation, not about business but about life, about cities they loved, about the small joys and frustrations of everyday routines. Sarah spoke of Toronto with a fondness that made him imagine her walking streets he had never seen, laughing in cafes, and he felt a quiet longing, a wish that he could be part of that world even briefly. They talked about work, yes, but it was the personal moments that lingered, Alex mentioning how lonely business trips could feel, how routine could make him forget the small things that mattered, Sarah sharing the gentle heartbreak of a marriage that had quietly ended, her voice steady but soft, no bitterness, just honesty, and Alex found himself listening differently, absorbing not just the words but the pauses, the sighs, the slight catch in her throat that revealed more than sentences could say. He realized he had not felt this connected to anyone in years, not in a conversation so simple, so unplanned, yet so meaningful. As the conversation continued, Alex felt the boundaries of propriety shift, not in a way that demanded action, but in a way that stirred his heart, that made him feel alive and human, longing and caution mingling in a confusing but beautiful mixture. He realized he had been sleepwalking in his own life. His relationship with Emily had grown quiet, predictable, and safe, but here, across the continent, in the gentle rain and warm light of the hotel cafe, he felt reminded of desire in its purest form, not just physical, but emotional, a hunger for understanding, for connection, for being seen. When it was time to return to the meetings, they walked back together, neither speaking much, but the silence was comfortable, filled with the tension of something new, something fragile and unspoken. Their hands brushed once as they reached the elevator, a spark of awareness, a subtle reminder that these moments were fleeting, precious, not to be taken for granted. Alex's mind raced, thinking about Emily, thinking about Sarah, thinking about how life sometimes placed impossible choices before you without warning, and he realized he had already been changed by this encounter, though nothing had yet happened to confirm it. Evening came quickly, the last meeting of the day ended, handshakes and polite smiles exchanged, the city lights outside glimmering through the hotel windows, rain still falling, and Alex felt the weight of the day settle in his chest. He wandered back to the cafe, hoping to find Sarah once more, and there she was, sitting alone at a small table, notebook open but forgotten, staring out at the city like she was waiting for someone. And when she looked up and caught his gaze, he saw a gentle smile, soft and real, not rehearsed, and he felt something inside him shift completely, a quiet acknowledgement that this encounter mattered, more than he could yet admit. They shared a few more words, talking about nothing and everything, the world narrowing to that small cafe and the gentle rhythm of rain, and for a brief time, Alex forgot about presentations, deadlines, the distance from home, the relationship that had grown cold. Everything faded except this rare, unexpected connection. Yet when they finally stood to leave, a pause stretched between them, heavy and delicate, neither wanting to be first to break it, a moment that seemed to stretch into forever. And Alex felt the truth of the trip settle deep inside him. Some meetings were never just about business, some encounters were never just accidental, and some choices would define him in ways he had not yet imagined. As he returned to his hotel room that night, the rain soft against the windows, Alex lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sarah, about Emily, about the strange pull that had guided him here, and he realized that this trip, which had seemed routine, had already begun to change him, quietly, irrevocably, and he knew that tomorrow would demand something of him, something he was not yet ready to name, yet could no longer ignore, a feeling that made his chest tighten and his heart ache, but also a feeling that made him feel more alive than he had in years. The final morning of his trip arrived quickly, Vancouver wrapped in a soft fog, rain turning to a light mist, the streets glimmering under the streetlights. Alex woke feeling restless, the previous day's meetings already heavy on his mind, but heavier still was the thought of Sarah, her smile, her words, the way she had listened to him like he mattered, a feeling he hadn't realized he was missing until now. He dressed quickly, rehearsed his presentation one last time, yet his thoughts kept wandering, not to numbers or charts, but to the quiet connection that had grown in the hotel cafe, fragile but undeniable. He arrived at the lobby earlier than usual, the building still hushed in the misty morning, and there she was, standing near the reception desk, checking her phone, seemingly unaware of him, yet when their eyes met, the world seemed to narrow, everything else fading into soft shadows, and Alex felt a sudden pull, as if the city itself had paused for this moment. He walked toward her, each step measured yet urgent, unsure of what words could capture what had grown between them, yet knowing he could not leave without acknowledging it. "Good morning," he said, voice steady but warmer than he expected, and Sarah's eyes lit with a subtle surprise, a smile curving her lips. "Good morning, Alex," she replied, voice calm, but there was a weight in her glance, an understanding that went beyond simple politeness, a shared recognition of what had passed between them in the hours they had spoken, a bond that existed quietly but clearly, a thread connecting them in a way that neither could ignore, even for the sake of routine. They talked as they walked through the hotel lobby together, exchanging gentle words about flights, schedules, the city, but beneath the small talk, the real conversation lingered, unspoken yet palpable, the sense of possibility that had begun the day before still hovering, each glance carrying meaning, each pause filled with what they were not saying, and Alex felt a strange combination of excitement and fear, knowing that he could not remain the same man who had arrived, that some part of him had already shifted irreversibly. At the airport, luggage rolled behind them, announcements calling for boarding, the hum of travelers filling the space, yet Alex and Sarah lingered near a small bench, hesitant to part, their conversation light on the surface but heavy with unspoken emotions. He mentioned keeping in touch, she agreed, both careful not to promise too much, yet both knowing that even a message, a brief note, could carry significance beyond measure. He felt a tightness in his chest, an ache that was not regret, but longing, the kind that made leaving feel impossible, and staying felt uncertain. As the final boarding call echoed, they shook hands, brief, polite, yet the gesture felt inadequate, Alex's mind racing, imagining what it would have been like to know her in a world without obligations, without distance, without the lives they had to return to, and Sarah's eyes held a quiet understanding, a mirror to his own feelings, neither pressing for more, yet both silently acknowledging that their connection mattered, had mattered, and would continue to matter, even if miles separated them. Alex settled into his seat on the plane, watching Vancouver fade beneath the clouds, the city lights dwindling like sparks in the mist, and he realized he felt different, awake in a way he had not in years, his heart louder than the engines, his mind full of questions he did not yet have answers for, thoughts of Emily pressing against thoughts of Sarah, the past and future colliding in ways that made him ache, yet feel alive. He knew that returning home would not be simple, that he could not simply step back into the life he had left behind, unchanged, because some truths had already revealed themselves, quietly, insistently. On the flight, he typed a message to Emily, paused, erased it, tried again, unsure if honesty or silence would matter more. He thought of the quiet heartbreak in Sarah's voice, the gentle warmth of her presence, and he realized that life sometimes forced choices in moments too brief to prepare for, and yet too significant to ignore. He stared out the window, clouds drifting past, and felt the weight of possibilities pressing on him, knowing that love, connection, and truth were rarely convenient, but always essential, even when messy or uncertain. By the time the plane touched down in Chicago, night had fallen, city lights shimmering against the dark, familiar yet somehow distant now. Alex felt the tug of home, but also a strange hesitation, as if stepping inside his apartment would mark a transition, a crossing of a line he could not uncross. He collected his luggage, moving through the terminal, people around him busy with ordinary routines, yet he felt suspended in a different rhythm, one dictated by emotions he could no longer ignore, by awareness of choices that had been waiting for him without his realizing it. Back in his apartment, the door closed with a soft click, familiar smells, familiar furniture, yet everything felt subtly different, quieter, heavier, alive with memory. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, thinking of Sarah, of the moments they had shared, small and fragile, yet significant. He thought of Emily, of their life together, and he realized that time alone, distance, reflection, would decide what he could keep, what he needed to let go, and what new path he might take. The heart often demanded courage, and courage was rarely neat or predictable. That night, Alex sat by the window, the city stretching endlessly before him, and he understood that some journeys were not measured in miles, flights, or hotel rooms, but in moments that stirred the heart, in conversations that awakened parts of you long ignored, in quiet acknowledgments of what life could offer if you were brave enough to face it. He felt both fear and hope, longing and clarity, and he knew that the choice now belonged to him, to act with honesty, to honor connection, and to live in a way that truly reflected the heart he had rediscovered, because some truths, once found, could not be buried, and some people, once met, could not be forgotten. And as he finally lay down to sleep, the city humming softly outside, Alex felt a sense of possibility, fragile but real, a gentle promise that life could surprise in ways he had never imagined, that love and connection could appear when least expected, and that sometimes, the hardest journeys were the ones that led back to yourself, awakened, aware, and ready for whatever the next chapter might bring.